For years, humans had been listening to the stars. Scientists built giant telescopes and arrays, trained them on distant points in the sky, and waited. They waited for whispers, for signs, for anything that might prove we were not alone. Most of the time, they only heard static. Just the hiss and crackle of empty space, the kind of sound that made you feel small and alone. But then slowly, things changed. Strange signals started to appear. At first, they were faint, barely distinguishable from random cosmic noise. But as technology improved, patterns became clear. There was rhythm in the chaos. There were voices, not voices like humans had, but something like laughter, something that felt alive, intelligent, and mocking. No one knew what to make of it at first. Were these signals a natural phenomenon? Were they just interference from distant stars? For a while, scientists dismissed the idea. But as months turned into years, and as more signals arrived, a disturbing picture formed. The sounds weren't random. They were deliberate. They were meant to be heard. Finally, advanced translation algorithms were brought in. Computers processed the signals, analyzing their patterns, their timing, the way they shifted in frequency. Slowly, almost painfully, the meaning began to reveal itself. The signals were not friendly, they were mocking. They were laughing at humanity. The news was leaked to only a handful of governments at first. The broadcast from deep space seemed to ridicule humans as primitive, slow, fragile. They spoke of our tiny planet as if it were a joke. Humans were bipeds, creatures with no hope of reaching beyond their small world. The aliens didn't even know we could hear them, or so they thought. Publicly, life went on as normal. People continued to go to work, raise families, and live without realizing that somewhere, far beyond the reach of their eyes, a species had noticed them and laughed. But behind the scenes, fear mixed with curiosity. The signals became a quiet obsession for a few brilliant minds. Astronomers, linguists, and mathematicians began to study them, trying to find out more. Why were they laughing? What did they want? And most importantly, what could they do? It was a chilling realization. Humanity was being watched. For decades, maybe even centuries, aliens had been observing Earth. And they thought we were insignificant. They didn't know our strength or our determination. They didn't know that we had learned from history, that we had survived disasters, that we had built tools and machines that could do the impossible. Even so, it was hard not to feel small. To hear your species laughed at from across the galaxy is a humbling, almost terrifying experience. Scientists shared their findings carefully. The world's leaders were briefed. Some dismissed it as science fiction. Others, more cautious, realized the truth. Humans had been noticed, and not in a flattering way. But what no one outside a few secret programs realized was that humanity had already been preparing. Long before the first mocking signals were detected, the world's greatest minds had quietly begun a project known only to a few. It was called Project Veil, and it was unlike anything the public had ever imagined. Hidden deep beneath the oceans, inside enormous underground facilities, engineers and scientists had been building a fleet. Not just any fleet, a fleet that could travel the stars, undetected. Cloaked ships hidden from alien sensors, equipped with technology that humanity had only dreamed of. The world thought humans had barely reached Mars. The truth was far more astonishing. These ships had been quietly sent to explore the solar system and beyond, learning about the cosmos while remaining invisible. The purpose of these ships was simple. Humanity did not want to be caught unprepared. We had survived wars, plagues, and countless disasters on Earth. Now, we were preparing to survive something greater, contact with a species far more advanced than ourselves. For years, the human fleet moved in silence. The aliens, busy mocking, never noticed. They assumed we were simple creatures still crawling in our small world, incapable of anything more than waving and sending signals into the void. But humanity watched them, learned their patterns, studied their ships, and recorded their broadcasts. Every mocking laugh, every joke about primitive Earthlings was carefully logged, analyzed, and stored. The irony was sharp. While the aliens laughed, humans learned. They learned how the aliens communicated, how they traveled, how they fought. And they waited. Patience became their weapon. Silence became their shield. The more the aliens mocked, the more humanity prepared. Inside the secret facilities, scientists often paused to reflect on what they were doing. It was a strange mix of fear and pride. Fear because the creatures out there were not only real but dangerous. Pride because humanity had become clever enough to protect itself without revealing a thing. Every ship, every sensor, every plan was a promise that if the aliens ever underestimated us, it would be a mistake they could not recover from. But even with the fleet in place, there were doubts. Could humans really hide from beings so advanced? Could they remain undetected in a universe that was vast but filled with eyes? And still, there was hope. Project Veil had been designed to be undetectable, to move like a shadow across the solar system, gathering knowledge and waiting for the right moment. The aliens continued to broadcast their laughter, unaware that Earth was no longer the small, defenseless planet they thought it was. They mocked our cities, our governments, our struggles. They ridiculed our attempts to explore space. Pathetic, one signal translated. Barely able to leave your little planet. And yet, the humans behind Project Veil smiled quietly. They knew the truth. The planet that seemed so weak from a distance had hidden giants beneath its surface. The species that seemed so small and fragile had learned the ways of the stars. The Earthlings were not as helpless as the aliens thought. They had already crossed the threshold of visibility. They had already prepared to declare themselves when the time was right. As the signals continued to pour in, the humans studying them began to notice patterns. Not all aliens were laughing. Some seemed curious, cautious, even hesitant. But the mocking ones were loudest, and their arrogance was clear. They assumed superiority, believed themselves untouchable. They assumed Earth would never be able to respond. Little did they know humanity was listening, watching, and learning. Every joke, every taunt, every signal sent across the void was feeding the humans' understanding. Each mockery strengthened the resolve to one day show the galaxy that Earth was not to be underestimated. In offices and labs around the world, the project team worked silently, knowing that no one could yet celebrate their achievement. Humanity had to remain hidden. Patience was everything. Every discovery, every new piece of knowledge about alien technology brought the team closer to a moment that might never come. The moment when humans would no longer be mocked. When the hidden strength of Earth would finally be revealed. And so life on the surface continued normally. People walked the streets, went to school, worked, and laughed, completely unaware of the silent watchers above them. The world had no idea that under the oceans, in secret facilities and floating unseen among the stars, humans were already preparing for a future where they might no longer be ignored, laughed at, or ridiculed. For now, the aliens laughed. They sent their signals, thinking they were superior. But every laugh, every joke, every mocking transmission was a lesson. Humanity was learning, humanity was preparing, and one day when the right moment came, the mocking would end, and the students would have become masters. Until then, Earth remained quiet, patient, and unseen. And the mocking from the stars continued, a cruel reminder that sometimes the greatest strength is hidden in plain sight. While the world above continued as usual, humans had already begun moving in silence. The oceans held secrets that no one on the surface could even imagine. Beneath miles of water, in vast hidden facilities, engineers and scientists were building something incredible, a fleet of ships unlike anything the world had seen, not for war, at least not yet. These ships were built to explore, to watch, and to prepare. Humanity was preparing to step into a universe that had been watching them for centuries. The project had a simple but ambitious goal, to ensure that if the day ever came when Earth needed to defend itself, it would be ready. The ships were not visible to any sensors known to humans or aliens. They moved silently, cloaked in technology that bent light and hid energy signatures. From the surface, they were invisible. From space, they were ghosts. Only the humans who built them knew the truth. The fleet was called Project Veil, and it was the culmination of decades of secret work. Engineers designed every ship with care. They were strong enough to withstand the vacuum of space, fast enough to travel beyond the solar system, and smart enough to observe without being detected. Scientists filled them with sensors, communication devices, and equipment to study alien technology. And most importantly, every ship had one thing humans themselves had to develop: patience, because the fleet had to remain silent. Humans could not afford to reveal their presence, not yet. The aliens still believed the surface of Earth was all that existed. They still laughed, believing humans were small, fragile, and easily ignored. Every mocking broadcast, every laugh sent from the stars became fuel for the people who operated Project Veil. The more the aliens underestimated them, the more humans learned. Inside the largest command centers, deep under the ocean, small teams worked around the clock. They monitored alien transmissions, studied fleet movements, and recorded every signal that reached the solar system. Some of the team members had never seen the sunlight. Their lives were devoted entirely to listening, learning, and preparing. It was a life of secrecy and dedication, one that most people on Earth could not even imagine. Outside, the world carried on as if nothing was happening. People traveled to work, studied, argued, and lived without knowing that above and below them, the future of humanity was being quietly shaped. But while humans appeared normal, they were quietly becoming something far more advanced than any alien could guess. The ships of Project Veil were not stationary. They moved beyond the Earth-Moon system, exploring the solar system and quietly observing the regions beyond. They studied the asteroid belt, monitored the outer planets, and even slipped toward the edges of the solar system where sunlight was weak. Every movement was carefully calculated, every jump into new territory measured. The humans wanted to learn, not provoke. The aliens had no idea these ships even existed, and while the fleet moved, it was not alone in its purpose. Back on Earth, hidden laboratories worked on understanding alien technology through signals and transmissions. Algorithms were developed to predict alien fleet patterns. Mathematical models were created to simulate alien behavior. Every discovery, every breakthrough, added to humanity's growing understanding. For a species that had once struggled to leave its own planet, this was nothing short of miraculous. The people working on Project Veil felt a quiet pride in their work. But there was always tension. Every day they asked themselves, what if the aliens discover us tomorrow? Are we truly ready? The answer was never simple. Humanity had strength, but it also had limitations. Still, the teams pushed forward, building more ships, refining their sensors, and creating defenses that remained invisible. Patience was as important as technology. Humanity could not rush. Some of the fleet was stationed in orbit around distant moons, invisible even to alien scanners. Others were hidden in the asteroid belt, blending with the rocks as if they were part of the natural landscape. Each ship had its role: observation, research, defense. They were prepared for anything, but they were not meant to be aggressive. Their primary mission was to learn, to gather knowledge, and to stay hidden until the moment came when humans could no longer be ignored. Communication between ships was a delicate matter. Standard radio waves could be detected, so humans developed quantum communication systems that were nearly impossible to trace. Messages could cross millions of kilometers in seconds without alerting the aliens. This meant the fleet operated like a single mind, perfectly coordinated but invisible. It was a level of planning and secrecy that no alien could have imagined. Meanwhile, humans also studied alien signals in more detail. The mocking broadcasts were not random. They followed patterns revealing habits, weaknesses, and strategies. Every joke, every insult was analyzed for hidden meaning. Humans began to understand the aliens' thinking, their culture, and their overconfidence. The aliens believed they were superior, untouchable, and they were about to discover how wrong they were. The more humans observed, the more they realized the scale of the universe beyond their home planet. The aliens were part of a larger network, a civilization that spanned many stars. They had fleets, colonies, and technologies far beyond anything humanity had. But the humans did not despair. Instead, they adapted. They learned quickly, using every advantage they had. Creativity, ingenuity, and patience became their weapons. Even the smallest details mattered. Humans studied alien movement patterns, energy emissions, and communication channels. They mapped every route, every hub, and every signal. They built simulations to predict alien responses to any potential human action. This preparation was painstaking, but it was necessary. The universe was not forgiving, and one mistake could be catastrophic. Yet despite the seriousness of their work, the people in Project Veil never lost sight of why they were doing it. They were not driven by hatred or vengeance. They were driven by survival and pride in humanity's potential. For the first time in history, humans realized that their species could be more than earthbound creatures. They could become guardians, observers, and participants in a universe that had long underestimated them. As the fleet moved silently through the solar system, humanity also began preparing contingencies. What if the aliens discovered them? What if they attacked? Ships were equipped with defensive systems, cloaking devices, and strategies designed to protect without revealing the fleet's true capabilities. Humans learned the art of concealment and deception as carefully as they studied alien technology. It was a school of survival, taught in silence and secrecy. And through it all, the mocking continued. The aliens had no idea that Earth was no longer just a planet. They had no idea that beneath the oceans, in secret facilities and far beyond their sensors, humans had already begun to master the stars. Every taunt only strengthened humanity's resolve. Every laugh became fuel for preparation, innovation, and patience. For those working in Project Veil, time had a different meaning. Days, months, and years blurred together. Some had never been to the surface of the Earth in decades. Their lives were devoted entirely to watching, learning, and preparing. Yet they believed in what they were doing. They knew that one day, humanity would reveal itself not as a weak, helpless species, but as one capable of standing on equal ground with the mocking beings who had once ridiculed them. And so, humanity waited. The fleet moved, hidden but ready. The signals were analyzed, the strategies refined, and the knowledge of alien civilization accumulated. Every day humans learned more about their observers and themselves. They discovered how to be patient, how to hide in plain sight, and how to use knowledge as a weapon. From the surface of Earth, nothing appeared to change. Cities bustled, people went to work, and children played in parks under the sun. Yet above and below them, humans were quietly becoming something more. They were becoming a species capable of facing the universe on their own terms. The mocking from the stars had not stopped. It had only begun to teach humanity the greatest lesson: never be underestimated. And so, humanity continued to listen. They continued to watch. They continued to prepare. The fleet of invisible ships drifted silently through the solar system, recording, learning, and waiting. They had no desire to provoke, no desire to attack. They only sought knowledge, patience, and readiness. And in time they would be ready for the moment when the aliens could no longer laugh at Earth without consequence. Until that day, humanity remained hidden, strong, and patient. The mocking from the stars continued, unaware that the quietest species on the planet was learning faster, observing more carefully, and preparing more diligently than anyone could imagine. And in that silence, a new chapter for humanity was quietly being written, one that would change everything when the time finally came. As the human fleet moved silently through the solar system, monitoring alien activity, a new signal appeared. It was faint at first, almost lost among the millions of transmissions the sensors received daily. But careful analysis revealed something strange. It wasn't random, it wasn't laughter, and it wasn't just another alien broadcast. It was a signal designed to attract attention. For those monitoring from the hidden command centers, a chill ran through the room. The signal had a pattern, a rhythm, and an energy signature that was familiar to the analysts. It was a trap, one of the oldest tricks in the galaxy. The aliens were trying to lure something out, to reveal itself. At first, the instinct was fear. What if the trap worked? What if the aliens finally discovered the fleet? But fear quickly gave way to careful planning. The humans had not come this far to be caught off guard. They were patient, and patience was their greatest weapon. They knew the aliens expected impulsive reactions. They knew the aliens laughed at humans because they believed Earthlings were reckless. This was the perfect moment to turn the tables. The fleet's leaders decided to play along. A decoy signal would be sent, mimicking the kind of communication the aliens expected from a primitive civilization. The signal would appear curious, clumsy, and harmless, exactly what the aliens wanted to see. It was a risk, yes, but it was a calculated risk. Every detail was considered, every potential consequence analyzed. Humanity was learning to fight with brains as much as with technology. Across the fleet, ships shifted position. Sensors were tuned to maximum sensitivity, and every communication channel was monitored for alien response. Engineers double-checked the cloaking systems, ensuring no energy leaked, no sign of life escaped detection. The ships became silent, watchers like predators hiding in plain sight, waiting for the moment when their presence would be revealed, not by accident but on humanity's terms. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the teams in the underground facilities worked tirelessly to coordinate the plan. Algorithms predicted how the aliens would react. Calculations simulated fleet movements, energy patterns, and communication responses. Every possibility was tested, every scenario accounted for. For decades, humans had prepared for a moment like this, the first chance to confront a species that had long mocked them. The decoy signal was launched. It broadcast a pattern of curiosity, almost childlike, as if humans were innocent and unaware of the larger universe. The aliens, confident in their superiority, detected it immediately. They did not hesitate. Their fleet began to move toward the coordinates of the signal, convinced that they would find a primitive civilization ready to greet them. They laughed openly over their channels, mocking Earthlings even before they arrived. From the hidden human fleet, the monitors recorded every movement. The alien ships approached with overconfidence, unaware that the signal they were following was a trap. The humans had prepared a zone of empty space, carefully mapped and calculated, where the decoy would draw the aliens. It was a field where the humans could observe safely, hidden but ready. Inside the command centers, the tension was palpable. No one had ever faced a direct alien approach like this. The stakes were enormous. One wrong move could reveal the fleet and the aliens. Superiority meant they could easily destroy humanity's vessels. But every team member knew their training, their preparation, and their patience would guide them. As the alien fleet drew closer, the silence in the control rooms was deafening. No one spoke unnecessarily. Every sensor, every scanner, every algorithm was active, watching, waiting. The aliens continued to mock, completely unaware that the humans were watching them with precision and patience. The decoy signal worked perfectly. The aliens believed they were on the verge of a great discovery, the primitive humans who had finally responded. They did not realize that the response was carefully orchestrated, designed to manipulate them into a false sense of security. Every step they took brought them closer to the moment when humans would no longer remain invisible. Inside the fleet, leaders coordinated quietly. The ships remained cloaked, energy signatures hidden, waiting for the right moment to move. Communication between vessels was instantaneous through quantum channels, allowing the fleet to operate as a single, unified entity. Every move was synchronized. Every sensor alert shared instantly. Humanity was no longer a simple planet-bound species. It was a network, a collective mind, ready to respond at the precise moment. Meanwhile, the alien fleet continued to advance, unaware of the trap. They assumed superiority, believing Earthlings could not understand the strategies or the risks of this encounter. They believed their mocking broadcasts were harmless, that their overconfidence would go unnoticed. But humans had been learning for decades, and every step of the aliens was being recorded, analyzed, and prepared for. As the aliens entered the carefully calculated zone, sensors aboard the human ships confirmed that the moment had arrived. Every calculation had been correct. The fleet was perfectly positioned, cloaked, and ready. The decoy signal had drawn them exactly where humans wanted them. The aliens had no idea that the hunters were already in place, hidden and patient. The command centers buzzed with controlled activity. Analysts and engineers monitored energy levels, fleet positions, and alien communications. Every piece of data was scrutinized. For decades, humans had prepared for this moment, and now it was finally within reach. They had observed, they had learned, and now they were ready to make their presence known on their own terms. Even in the alien fleet, some signals showed hesitation. Perhaps a few individuals sensed something was wrong, but overconfidence drowned out caution. The aliens laughed, mocking the supposed simplicity of humans, convinced they were still dealing with a species far below their own. The irony was invisible to them. The hidden human ships continued to drift, silent and unseen. Each vessel was a silent observer, collecting data, measuring energy signatures, and preparing for the moment of decloak. The fleet had learned the alien technology, studied their tactics, and predicted their behavior. Humanity had been underestimated, and that was the advantage they would now exploit. Inside the command centers, one voice finally broke the silence. It was a simple acknowledgement, a quiet note of readiness. "Everything is in place," the officer said. "All ships are ready. We wait for the signal." No one else spoke. Words were unnecessary. Every individual knew the importance of patience and precision. This was not a moment to rush. It was a moment to observe, prepare, and wait. The aliens continued to approach, confident and mocking. They believed the humans were simple, weak, and incapable. Their arrogance blinded them to the possibility that every action had been anticipated, that every move was being watched, that the humans they mocked were no longer defenseless. And then, for a brief moment, a quiet realization passed among the human teams. Soon, the hiding would end. Soon, the species that had been mocked and underestimated would reveal that it had been observing, learning, and preparing all along. The aliens had no idea what awaited them. They believed they were superior, that their mocking signals would continue unchallenged. For decades, humans had endured laughter from the stars. They had been patient, careful, and observant. Every taunt, every insult, every broadcast was a lesson. The decoy signal was not just a trap. It was the first step in showing the universe that Earth was no longer a simple, defenseless planet. Humanity had been waiting for the right moment to reveal its presence, and that moment was approaching. The alien fleet, unaware of the danger, moved deeper into the trap. They remained arrogant, focused on the decoy and on their own assumptions. And as they did, the hidden human fleet continued to watch, waiting and preparing for the day when patience would become power and learning would become action. For the humans observing from the shadows, it was both a test and a confirmation. The strategies, the simulations, and the years of preparation were all proving effective. Humanity had learned the greatest lesson of all, that strength could be measured not by size or firepower, but by patience, observation, and the ability to remain unseen until the right moment. And so, the fleet waited. The decoy signal continued to draw the aliens into the carefully planned zone. The humans remained silent, cloaked, and patient. They knew that the alien arrogance, combined with their own preparation, would create the perfect opportunity for the next step, the moment when humanity would no longer be hidden, the moment when the mocking from the stars would face the truth. The aliens, confident and mocking, had no idea that the hunters were already in place. Every laugh, every broadcast, every movement had been recorded and analyzed. Humanity had learned from every mistake, every taunt, and every observation. They were ready to act, not recklessly, but with precision, patience, and a force the aliens could never have anticipated. And so in the quiet depths of space, the stage was set. The decoy had worked. The aliens were trapped in a zone of empty space drawn by arrogance and curiosity. The human fleet remained unseen, ready, and patient. Soon, the next phase would begin, the moment when humanity would show that it was No longer a species to be mocked, no longer a planet to be ignored. Until then, the ships drifted silently, observing, learning, and preparing. Every signal from the aliens, every movement, and every ass. The moment had finally come. After years of preparation, observation, and careful planning, humanity's hidden fleet was ready to reveal itself. The decoy had worked perfectly. The alien fleet, confident in its superiority and amused by what it thought were primitive humans, had moved into the exact zone the fleet's strategists had prepared. Every calculation had been checked, every position confirmed. The humans had waited patiently, and now the time for action had arrived. Inside the command centers, the atmosphere was tense but controlled. Analysts monitored every energy signature, every alien movement, and every signal being broadcast from the alien ships. Engineers checked systems one last time, confirming that cloaking was active, weapons were ready, and communication channels were fully secure. Every human in the room knew the stakes. This was the moment the aliens would finally learn that Earth was not as weak as they believed. For decades, humanity had been underestimated. The aliens had laughed openly, mocking humans as small, fragile creatures barely capable of leaving their planet. They believed Earthlings were insignificant, unworthy of attention, and incapable of any real challenge. But now, all of that would change. In space, the human ships waited silently. Cloaked and undetectable, they had drifted into position, surrounding the decoy signal from all directions. The alien fleet, confident in its perceived advantage, continued to approach. They laughed over their channels, ridiculing humans for the last time. Pathetic, one broadcast translated. Barely able to survive on your little world, and yet you try to play at space travel. How amusing. The words were sharp, mocking, cruel, exactly the kind of arrogance humans had anticipated. And inside the hidden fleet, no one moved hastily. Every crew member knew the importance of patience. This was not just about showing the aliens that humans could fight. It was about demonstrating that they had been underestimated for too long, and that the arrogance of the stars could no longer go unchallenged. Then the moment of decloak began. Slowly, carefully, one ship after another activated its systems to remove the invisibility shields. From the perspective of the aliens, the decoy zone had remained empty. From the perspective of humanity, the real power of Earth was emerging from the shadows. Metallic giants appeared from the void, vessels larger, faster, and more sophisticated than anything the aliens could have imagined. The first broadcasts from the alien fleet were confusion and disbelief. Their sensors had not detected these ships before. Their assumptions, that humans were primitive and incapable, had been completely shattered. For a moment there was silence, as if the universe itself had paused. Then, cautious transmissions began to replace the laughter. The aliens tried to communicate, asking questions, trying to understand what had happened. But humanity did not answer, not yet. The fleet moved as one, coordinated perfectly through quantum communication channels. Energy readings spiked, revealing defensive systems that were unlike anything the aliens had seen before. Weapons were online, not in aggression, but in readiness. Sensors scanned the alien ships, recording their every detail. Humanity had learned their patterns, their technology, and their weaknesses. Now the aliens were the ones under observation. The flagship of the human fleet broadcast a single, clear message to all alien channels. It was short, simple, and unmistakable. "We've been listening." The words echoed through the void, and, for the first time, the aliens understood that they had been mistaken. They had assumed invisibility meant ignorance. They had assumed mocking signals would go unanswered. They had assumed that humans could not defend themselves. Now, they realized that they had underestimated a species that had been quietly observing, learning, and preparing for decades. Panic began to ripple through the alien fleet. Some ships tried to retreat while others attempted to reposition. Their sensors, which had once easily detected humans from afar, now struggled to understand the sudden appearance of ships that had been invisible until this moment. Every broadcast, Every sensor reading and every tactical maneuver of the aliens was being recorded, analyzed, and stored by the human fleet. Inside the command centers on Earth, the crews watched in quiet satisfaction. For years, they had trained for this moment. Every calculation had been perfect. Every ship had emerged exactly as planned. The aliens, for all their technology and arrogance, were caught completely off guard. Humanity had finally turned the tables, and the power dynamic in the region of space had shifted in a single, decisive moment. The aliens attempted to communicate. Again, their tones urgent and cautious now, no longer mocking. They demanded explanations, asking how humans had managed to remain hidden for so long. The human response was deliberate silence. Every move had been orchestrated to make the aliens realize that the planet they had ridiculed was far more capable than they had ever imagined. The decloak continued, one ship after another revealing itself. The fleet's formation was strategic, designed to show strength without aggression. The humans did not attack. They only made it clear that they were present, capable, and ready. For the aliens, the sight was overwhelming. They had never encountered a species that could combine stealth intelligence and technological skill in this way. Every assumption they had made about humans was being challenged in real time. On Earth, the hidden teams allowed themselves a quiet moment of pride. The patience, discipline, and dedication of decades had culminated in this one event. Humans had gone from being the subject of ridicule to being a force that demanded respect, a species that could no longer be ignored by the galaxy. The mocking that had once echoed across the void was replaced by silence. The silence of beings who suddenly realized that they had been wrong. Even within the alien fleet, some individuals began to understand the magnitude of what had occurred. Their arrogance had blinded them. They had assumed humans were simple, unprepared, and defenseless. And yet, here were ships far more sophisticated than they had anticipated, moving with precision, equipped with technology that had remained hidden for decades. The realization was terrifying. The human fleet maintained control without firing a single shot. The presence alone was enough to change the dynamic. Every ship in the fleet was visible now, every sensor reading active, every weapon system ready to respond. The aliens had no advantage. Their mockery had ended, replaced by caution, confusion, and fear. Humanity had demonstrated its capability without aggression, showing that strategy, preparation, and patience could achieve what brute force could not. Communication attempts from the aliens continued, now focused on understanding rather than mocking. But humanity remained deliberate in its silence. The message was clear. Earthlings had observed, learned, and prepared in secret. The age of underestimation was over. The mocking from the stars was no longer an indication of superiority. It was evidence of ignorance, and now, the humans had revealed that ignorance could be costly. For the crews inside the human ships, there was a mixture of pride and focus. They had achieved the impossible. They had turned a moment of danger into a demonstration of human ingenuity. Every sensor, every strategy, every calculation had worked perfectly. Humanity was no longer a planet-bound species subject to ridicule. It was a hidden power in space, a silent force that could reveal itself at the right time. The alien fleet, overwhelmed and cautious, began to reconsider its approach. The mocking laughter had stopped completely. Some ships retreated slightly, while others held their position, unsure of how to proceed. They were facing a species they had misjudged, a species that had been preparing for this moment for decades. Every assumption they had made was now being questioned. On Earth, the teams in the command centers understood the significance of this moment. The fleet's decloak had changed everything. Humanity had demonstrated that it could protect itself, that it could observe, learn, and act strategically. The galaxy had underestimated humans for too long, and now the humans had shown that they were a force to be reckoned with. Not through aggression, but through intelligence, patience, and preparation. And so, in the vastness of space, the human fleet drifted in formation, visible and unyielding. The aliens could see them, but they could not touch them. Humanity had turned the tables, demonstrating a power that had long been hidden. The mocking signals from the stars had ended, replaced by caution, confusion, and respect. The moment of Decloak was not just a military maneuver, it was a statement. It was proof that humans were no longer to be underestimated, no longer to be mocked, and no longer to be treated as insignificant. For the first time, humanity had shown the galaxy that it had learned, observed, and prepared in silence, and that the species that had once been laughed at could now command attention through its presence alone. And in the silence that followed, humanity waited. The alien fleet had been revealed the truth, and the humans were ready to respond if necessary. The galaxy had underestimated them for far too long. Now the lesson had been delivered. Earth was not weak, Earth was not small, and the humans who had been mocked could no longer be ignored. The alien fleet had finally stopped laughing. What had begun as a mocking, overconfident advance had become something entirely different, a tense standoff. They hovered in the zone of space where humans had carefully prepared the trap, their sensors scanning nervously for signs of the invisible threat that had just revealed itself. For the first time, the aliens were unsure. Their arrogance had vanished, replaced by confusion, caution, and fear. Inside the human fleet, silence reigned. The ships were fully decloaked, their presence clear, their weapon systems online but restrained. Humanity had made a choice. This was not a moment for reckless aggression. This was a moment to assert dominance without firing a single shot. Every human crew member knew that what they were doing was far more powerful than battle. They were teaching a lesson the aliens would never forget. The flagship broadcast once more, a deliberate and unmistakable message to all alien channels. You assumed we were weak. You assumed we were helpless. You assumed we could not see you. We were listening, and now you see us. The words were simple, yet heavy with meaning. They echoed across the void and carried the weight of decades of preparation, of hidden fleets, of patience and intelligence. The aliens attempted to respond, but their transmissions were cautious, measured. Gone were the mocking tones, replaced by uncertainty. Every broadcast was an attempt to understand, to negotiate, to avoid conflict that they now suspected they might not control. Inside the human command centers, teams monitored the situation with careful attention. Analysts watched alien energy readings, scanning for any hint of aggression. Engineers monitored fleet readiness, ensuring every system was functioning perfectly. Every human involved understood that this moment was not just a confrontation, it was a turning point. Humanity had been underestimated for centuries, and now, for the first time, the balance of power had shifted. The aliens hesitated, unsure of how to proceed. Some ships drifted slightly backward, trying to create distance. Others attempted to communicate, their messages measured and cautious, asking questions about humanity's fleet, their capabilities, and their intentions. The humans remained deliberate and silent. They did not panic. They did not need to rush. Their presence alone was a statement. For decades, humans had been ridiculed, mocked, and underestimated. Every taunt from the stars had been catalogued, every insult analyzed, every alien assumption studied. Humans had learned from these signals, building a fleet and strategies designed to turn arrogance into vulnerability. Now, the aliens were facing the results of that preparation. Every move, every calculation, every observation had been planned. Humanity was no longer an easy target. They were a force of precision, patience, and knowledge. The alien fleet began to realize how dangerous underestimating humans had been. Their own arrogance had blinded them. They had believed that cloaked ships, careful observation, and silent patience were beyond the capability of a primitive species. Now, they understood that they had been wrong. Humanity was not reckless. Humanity was not weak. Humanity was patient, intelligent, and capable of using strategy as a weapon more powerful than any firepower. For a long while, the two forces remained in standoff. No shots were fired. No sudden moves were made. The humans did not need to act aggressively. Their presence alone had shifted the dynamic. The aliens, still unsure of how much humanity knew and what they could do, held back. The very fact that humans could remain calm, deliberate, and coordinated while facing a fleet that once mocked them was a shock to the aliens' understanding. Inside the human ships, crew members carefully monitored alien behavior. Every signal, every transmission, every slight change in position was analyzed. Humans were learning even as the aliens tried to understand them. They had watched for decades, studying the patterns of these beings. Now, in the quiet of the standoff, they had the chance to see how the aliens reacted under uncertainty, under the stress of facing an unknown but capable opponent. The aliens attempted to probe, sending small scout drones and scanning waves. Humans observed, measured, and cataloged every detail. Defensive systems were online but not used. Humans were in control, not through violence, but through superior strategy and patience. The very restraint shown by the human fleet was a message the aliens could not ignore. These were not impulsive beings. These were thinkers, planners, and observers who had waited for the perfect moment to reveal themselves. For the first time, some of the aliens began to question their own assumptions. How could a species that appeared so fragile on their home planet possess the technology, the strategy, and the coordination to move through space undetected for decades? How could they remain calm, patient, and deliberate in the presence of an entire alien armada? The mocking they had relied on so heavily now seemed foolish. They had misjudged humanity entirely. Back on Earth, inside the command centers, humans felt the weight of the moment. It was tense, yes, but there was also pride. Every observation, every lesson learned from decades of alien communication had led to this. The humans had turned fear into preparation, preparation into strategy, and strategy into a demonstration of power, and the aliens had no choice but to acknowledge it. The standoff continued for hours, though time felt different in the quiet void of space. The aliens tried to communicate cautiously, probing for weaknesses, asking questions, testing responses. Humans responded only through observation and readiness. Every gesture, every movement of the fleet was intentional, designed to show control without aggression. Humanity was demonstrating that dominance could be achieved not through immediate conflict, but through patience, preparation, and intelligence. For the alien fleet, the situation became increasingly uncomfortable. Their arrogance had led them here. Their confidence had been shattered by a species they had believed to be helpless, and now they had to face the possibility that humans were not only capable of defending themselves, but of observing, learning, and responding with precision that they could not match. The quiet restraint of the human fleet sent a powerful message. Every ship, fully visible, fully capable, and fully prepared, represented decades of planning and study. The aliens could see it, and they knew it. Their laughter was gone. Their confidence was gone. They were now faced with a species they had never truly understood. Inside the command centers, humans remained calm. No one celebrated. There was no cheering, no triumph. They knew that patience was still key. The lesson had been delivered, but the standoff was not over. Every move, every alien probe, every attempt to communicate was being observed. Humans were gathering information, learning everything they could, ensuring that if conflict ever came, they would be ready. And then small changes began to appear in the alien fleet. Some ships started to reposition, creating distance, attempting to retreat. Others paused, unsure of what to do next. The very fact that the aliens were hesitating, that they no longer assumed control, was a victory in itself. Humans had not fired a shot, yet they had shifted the power dynamic entirely. The standoff continued into the equivalent of days, though it was measured in cycles of observation, calculation, and readiness. Humanity remained composed, silent, and in control. The aliens tried to understand, to negotiate, to figure out how a species they had mocked so openly could now stand before them with confidence, coordination, and strategic dominance. Every action the aliens took was being logged, studied, and analyzed. Humans were learning even now, understanding alien decision-making, weaknesses, and habits. This was more than a standoff. It was a classroom in strategy and patience, with humanity as the teacher and the once arrogant aliens as the students forced to learn a lesson they had never expected. Inside the fleet, humans discussed contingency plans quietly. Defensive measures were ready, escape routes were mapped, and communication was seamless. They had turned fear into readiness, readiness into power, and power into restraint. Humanity had learned that true strength was not in immediate aggression, but in knowledge, observation, and the ability to make the opponent uncertain and cautious. For the aliens, the lesson was clear. They had mocked a species that had prepared in secret, underestimated those who had studied them for decades, and revealed a force far greater than they had imagined. The standoff was a turning point. Humanity had claimed its place in space, not by brute force but by intelligence, patience, and strategy. And so the standoff continued, tense and silent, but with the balance of power firmly shifted. The aliens could no longer act with certainty. The humans remained calm, ready, and in control. The mocking had ended. The lesson had been delivered. And the galaxy would never again underestimate Earth and its people. The standoff in space had reached its peak. The alien fleet had hesitated, confused and cautious, unsure of how to respond to the humans who had suddenly revealed themselves. The mocking laughter that had echoed across the void for centuries had vanished, replaced by silence and careful calculation. For the first time, Earthlings were in control, not through sheer firepower, but through patience, intelligence, and strategy. Inside the hidden command centers on Earth, humans worked with focused calm. Every sensor, every communication channel, and every ship in the fleet was monitored meticulously. Analysts studied alien behavior, trying to predict what they might do next. Engineers confirmed that all systems were functioning perfectly, ensuring that the fleet could remain in control of the standoff indefinitely if necessary. Humanity had learned that power was as much about patience and restraint as it was about technology. For decades, humans had been mocked by a species far more advanced, laughed at for their small planet, their primitive technology, and their apparent fragility. But now, the centuries of preparation had paid off. The fleet was no longer a secret, and yet it had not been used aggressively. The humans had turned the aliens' assumptions against them, demonstrating that the species they had ridiculed was capable of incredible discipline, intelligence, and coordination. The flagship transmitted a clear message to the alien fleet. It was concise, deliberate, and carried the weight of a species that had been underestimated for far too long. We are not helpless. We are not unaware. We are capable, prepared, and patient. Your arrogance has been noted. Your assumptions, recorded. Humanity is not a species to be mocked. The message spread across alien channels, reaching every ship in their fleet. For the first time, they realized that humans had been observing them, studying them, and preparing for exactly this moment. The realization sent waves of unease through their ranks. They had assumed superiority, but now they understood that they had been completely misjudged. Some alien ships began to move cautiously, attempting to create distance, while others remained in position, uncertain how to proceed. There was no aggression from the human fleet, yet the aliens were the ones on edge. Humanity had proven a simple truth. The most powerful weapon was not always firepower. Observation, patience, strategy, and timing could achieve far more than immediate confrontation. Inside the human fleet, crew members maintained calm vigilance. Every alien movement, every change in energy readings, every broadcast was analyzed. Humans were learning even in the midst of this encounter, understanding how a species that had once laughed at them behaved under pressure and uncertainty. The tables had turned. Humanity was no longer the subject of ridicule. They were the measured force that commanded attention without firing a single shot. Back on Earth, the teams in the underground command centers allowed themselves a quiet moment of reflection. The fleet had performed perfectly. The decoy signal, the careful positioning, the patience. Everything had worked. Humans had been underestimated, mocked, and even scorned, but they had used that mockery as fuel for preparation. Now, they, had revealed themselves not through violence but through presence and precision. The alien fleet, once confident, was now unsure. Their arrogance had been shattered, replaced by a cautious curiosity. Some ships attempted limited communication, seeking understanding, asking questions about humanity's fleet, technology, and intentions. Humans responded with deliberate silence. They had no desire to provoke. They had only wanted to show that they were capable, ready, and no longer to be underestimated. As the hours passed, the standoff began to change subtly. The aliens started to recognize the discipline, intelligence, and strategy of the human fleet. Their attempts to probe, test, and communicate were met with calm observation and readiness. Humanity demonstrated that they were not impulsive. They were deliberate, patient, and prepared. The power dynamic had shifted entirely. The mocking from the stars had ended, replaced by respect, caution, and an unspoken understanding that Earthlings could no longer be ignored. Then a new phase began. The flagship transmitted another message, one intended not to threaten, but to assert presence and offer a path toward understanding. We have listened for centuries. We have observed your actions, your patterns, and your judgments. Humanity is no longer invisible. We are capable of defending ourselves, learning, and acting when necessary. We offer this message as proof that underestimation has consequences. The galaxy should know, Earthlings are patient, intelligent, and ready. The words resonated across the alien fleet. For the first time, there was no laughter. The transmissions that had once mocked humans were now replaced by silence, as the aliens processed what they had witnessed. They realized that a species they had assumed weak was now visible, capable, and strategic. The lesson had been delivered. Humanity had proven that preparation, intelligence, and patience could outweigh brute strength. Inside the human fleet, there was a quiet sense of achievement. They had not fired a single shot, yet the power of their presence had shifted the dynamic of the encounter. The aliens had been forced to recognize that humanity was a species to be taken seriously. The centuries of ridicule had ended, replaced by a cautious respect that would influence every interaction from this point forward. Some alien ships attempted to retreat slightly, moving back toward a safer position. Others remained, unsure of how to proceed. Humanity maintained its position, demonstrating readiness without aggression. The message was clear. Humans were capable, intelligent, and patient, and they had been underestimated at their peril. On Earth, the command centers reflected on the implications. Humanity had shown the galaxy that it could prepare, observe, and act strategically. The mockery from the stars had been transformed into a lesson about patience, intelligence, and hidden strength. The human species had stepped out of the shadows, revealing itself not through aggression, but through capability and resolve. As the standoff continued, humans realized that the encounter had changed something fundamental. The galaxy had underestimated Earth, and that had provided the opportunity to reveal its strength. For decades, humans had been mocked and dismissed. Now, they had demonstrated that patience, preparation, and intelligence could achieve what brute force alone could not. The alien fleet, cautious and uncertain, began to communicate more formally. They asked questions, sought explanations, and attempted to negotiate. Humanity responded with clarity, emphasizing observation, preparation, and readiness. The aliens understood that humans were no longer a species to be ignored or ridiculed. They had emerged from the shadows not as aggressors, but as capable participants in the galactic arena. Inside the fleet, humans reflected on the years of preparation. Every decoy signal, every hidden ship, every calculation had led to this moment. The centuries of mockery, observation, and preparation had culminated in a demonstration of intelligence, patience, and strategy. Humanity had shown the galaxy that it could no longer be underestimated. Finally, the alien fleet began to withdraw, still cautious, but aware of the lesson they had received. The humans did not pursue. The point had been made. The mocking had ended. Respect, caution, and awareness had replaced arrogance and laughter. Humanity had used patience and intelligence to secure a position in the galaxy that could never be ignored. Back on Earth, the teams allowed themselves a quiet celebration. They had achieved something extraordinary. They had turned ridicule into preparation, patience into power, and visibility into influence. The galaxy had learned that Earthlings were capable, intelligent, and ready to defend themselves if necessary. Humanity had revealed that underestimation came at a cost, and that preparation and strategy could achieve far more than aggression alone. The message to the stars had been clear. Humans were no longer the species to be mocked. They were patient, intelligent, and capable of acting decisively when the moment was right. The alien fleet had learned that lesson, and the galaxy would remember it. As the fleet slowly returned to hidden positions, the teams reflected on the encounter. They had demonstrated a new kind of strength, one rooted not in immediate aggression, but in observation, preparation, and strategic patience. Humanity had revealed itself on its own terms, proving that even a species once dismissed as small and fragile could shape the balance of power through intelligence and discipline. In the end, the standoff became a story of restraint, preparation, and the power of patience. Humanity had turned centuries of ridicule into an opportunity for demonstration. The alien fleet had learned to respect the humans, and the message to the galaxy was clear. Earthlings were ready, capable, and no longer invisible. And so, the humans returned to their hidden posts, their fleet intact, their purpose fulfilled. They had not attacked, yet they had proven that they were a force to be reckoned with. The galaxy had learned a valuable lesson. Do not mock a species that has been observing, learning, and preparing in silence. For when patience meets intelligence, even the smallest world can command respect among the stars. The mocking had ended. Humanity had emerged visible, capable, and unyielding. And as the stars looked down on Earth, the galaxy knew one truth that could never be ignored. The humans were no longer the underestimation. They were the hidden strength that had revealed its